very happy to welcome you all to this public forum event with the Police and Crime Commissioner and at least one police representative. I believe the other one may be flying in at any moment. So we will obviously welcome him when he arrives. So thank you very much for coming. It's actually very interesting to see, the numbers here that of clearly interested people. So as you may know, or you may not know actually, my name's Romero. I'm a councillor for Southdown in Bath, but I'm also the newly elected council leader for Bath and North East Somerset, which is partly why I've been given this marvellous role of introducing the forum tonight. So the Lib Dems are a new administration, and as a big part of the last few weeks has been getting to know all the council's partners, so what each of the partners does and how we can also improve those relationships. So as I hope you would expect, the Police Crime Commissioner and the police are amongst our most important partners. As I'm sure you would agree, many of the issues that matter most to our residents are matters of concern to the police, the council, as well as to our communities, and so our joint responsibility. Feeling safe and protected, as well as being able to access police services, are key in helping our communities become stronger and more cohesive. One of our key aims as a new administration is to promote openness and transparency, and I think this sort of forum is an excellent example of that sort of approach. And so we want to sort of emulate that within the council as well. And just as a side note, another of our key policies as a new administration is addressing the climate emergency. So I appreciate the efforts made by the police locally to introduce sustainable transport options in their work. And I see one of those is about more bobbies on bikes, which I think will be fantastic for us all to see. So I'm here and I will be staying to listen and to learn and to hear what you have to say about the police and your community and how you can be helping each other, perhaps sort of helping the police with their inquiries, kind of thing. So thank you to the Police and Crime Commissioner, to Sue Mountstevens, and to the police representatives for being here. And I'm looking forward personally to a very informative evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Yeah. If you can't wave, I'll wave back. I'm very friendly. Thank you very much, and I apologise. I've got here with those few minutes to spare. I'll just whinge a bit. It's taken me 2.5 hours to do 9 miles. So Bristol has got a lot to explain. Anyway, and poor Steve hasn't even made it here yet. So eventually I'll be able to welcome Assistant Chief Constable Stephen Cullen, but delighted that Inspector Gavin is here. And let me just explain why are we having these meetings. I have regularly meetings that I go around the patch in Somerset, and the reason is because people ask me is that they quite often will see their local PCSOs, their local officers, but they rarely get the opportunity to see anything at a strategic level, to see how it all fits together. But of course, a lot of your questions, I'm sure, are very local. So it's no point just having someone strategic who knows nothing about the local stuff. So I'm here to try to explain the umbrella of where we are, and then Gavin will explain. Steve, do come. I know it's taken hours. It's okay.
Hello, folks. It just shows there's no special treatment for the police. We get stuck in traffic as well.
I can't tell you how many times I wish that I could have one of those blue lights. You know how in cop shows they get it from underneath their seats and put it on the top of their car? Well, I could have done with that about half an hour ago. Anyway, so the reason we have it is so that you hear about the strategic and then you hear about the local, because that's really important. So I spent a lot of time in Keynsham. We'll have met quite a few of you. I was elected in 2012, I was re-elected in 2016. For those of us who are old enough, you may have visited my shop across the road when we ran the bakery, and my parents lived only a few miles down the road as well. So I know Keynsham well, and it was a great relief that you hadn't changed the driving here. One of the things the PCC can't do is break the speed limit, so however much I might have done. Anyway, so as a Police and Crime Commissioner, I am only one of 6 female Police and Crime Commissioners in the country, and there's 41 across England and Wales, and I'm only one of 3 independents. And I know that some of you are politicians, and I'm not knocking politicians in any way, shape or form, but I think that as far as being a Police and Crime Commissioner with the police should not be a party politically influenced. And that was one of the reasons that I stood in 2012. And to be fair, over the years, it has become even more important to me why an independent PCC has value. And the reason I say that, and people will say, well, you don't have the same influence with national government. That was certainly a comment that was made in 2012, but that has not happened actually. To be fair to the government, that they have treated us all very fairly, and I'm one of the national leads on reducing reoffending, and I have access to ministers and their officials. So that access has worked very well. So I hold these forums regularly across Avon and Somerset, and we learn a lot more from you than I suspect you learn from us, to be fair, because what we will be doing as police will be doing many things, and many of the questions that you will probably raise is because you don't know about what the police are doing. So we need to improve that communication. And I'm, as I say, I am particularly pleased that Gavin's here, because some of the questions that some of you have sent in, which is great, thank you. But some of the other questions that will be raised will be considered. So let's just talk about what my role is, and if I can explain that to you in a few minutes, then I will be a genius, because having been in this role since 2012, I still don't think my mum's got it. She phoned me when she's got a ticket, and she said, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing, Mum, she can see. So I'm a bridge between local people and the police. And the reason I'm a bridge, so not so much at a local level, but I'm a bridge because although I have absolutely no operational input, so I cannot tell Gavin or any police officers or PCSOs about what they should and shouldn't be doing, because that is the Chief Constable, and tonight Andy is being represented by Stephen Cullen. So that is not my role. But for those of you who've ever run households, those who hold the purse strings does have a degree of influence, and I hold the purse strings. So I'm not bragging, just that's the point. But what keeps me awake at night? Because what I'm trying to do with the senior officers and local officers is that we want you to be safe. We want you to be safe, and we want you to feel safe. And that's quite hard, because this is an area of low-level crime. But if you read any of your papers, you will think that if you come out and you walk your dogs, you go shopping, that something's going to happen to you. This is an area of relatively low-level crime. But the media, and that doesn't sell stories, does it? So that doesn't happen. What you tell me influences where we spend our resources. So I'm sure one of the issues that will come out later on tonight is I've given up reporting it because the police do nothing. Okay? I'm already anticipating what you're going to be telling me. And I will tell you that if you don't report it, I can guarantee that nothing will happen. But if you don't, I'm urging you to report it, because although something may not happen immediately, it's where we allocate resources. So if there is an issue, then resources will be allocated to it. If we don't know there's an issue, then you won't get the resources. So please, please, please report either online, because then you don't even have to, you can do it in your time when it suits you, or on 101. But please do report it. However frustrated you get, and you can be tutting away and thinking they don't do anything anyway, please, please report it. So I hold the Chief Constable to account, and I'm here to make your communities safer. So one of my statutory roles is to produce a police and crime plan, which there will be some over there. And I went out to over 3,000 people about what they wanted the police to concentrate on. And you could say, what's someone like a layperson who's not a police officer, what are we doing choosing priorities? Well, one, it's the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner. But two, the police now can no longer do everything. I'm not sure they ever could, but we cannot do everything. And we now have to prioritise. And that's where we set the Police and Crime Plan. That's how we're prioritising. So we worked on a number of priorities to protect the most vulnerable from harm, to strengthen and improving local communities, to make sure that the constabulary have got the right people, the right capacity, the right capability and the right culture, and then to work with our partners so that we stop silo thinking. So those were the priorities of what we're doing. And I've only got a few minutes, so I just want to really concentrate on the first priority of protecting the most vulnerable from harm. I'm absolutely passionate that if we can't do everything, we have to protect the most vulnerable. That's what the police are here to do. And that's all types of abuse, domestic abuse, sexual abuse, child sex exploitation, child criminal exploitation, those children who are being used in county lines to traffic drugs and modern slavery. So that's the priority. And when my kids were younger, when they were upstairs, I could believe that they were doing their homework, but I knew they were safe. We don't have that now because we don't know our children are safe. Most children over the age of 9 the majority now have smartphones. The numbers of children who will go up to their rooms and you do not know who they're talking to. You do not know who is grooming you. And if you think about it, as a child, you all go through stages of vulnerability. No one can ever say they're not vulnerable. And if someone is grooming someone, if someone is pretending to be their best friend, or another 13, 14-year-old who may just live a few miles away, then they can groom for weeks, for months, and sometimes even years. And sometimes they will say we have an example of someone after 2 years of grooming said, why don't you come and meet me at the bus station? And don't tell your mum and dad because they won't understand that we're in love, because I've been your best friend. Luckily, it was picked up by the National Crime Agency. They picked up someone who was flying in from Australia to pick up that child. So those are the things that when I talk about grooming, that's what I'm talking about. And we have some examples where it can happen in 15 days. We have an example where, not in our patch, but where a young girl was targeted, groomed, exploited, raped, and then murdered, all within 15 days. So your mum and dad's got no chance. So the internet is a brilliant thing. It has opened our different eyes to knowledge, to be able to lead a different way of life. But according to the NSPCC, 1 in 7 young people have taken a semi-naked or naked picture of themselves, and half of them have shared them with someone else. Now, once they go on to the internet, we know that they're not in control, and so you hear the most awful cases of children being blackmailed, children being told to do things so that they don't tell them and dad, and of course they're terribly embarrassed by what they've done, and don't want to share it. So that's a real target for the police to be able to work with them. So we all have a responsibility to safeguard our young people, and I'm really pleased that the Constabulary have introduced a youth and policing education hub, because we need to work with our young people. We have seen with austerity cuts that youth clubs have closed and all various alternative things for the children have done. And I was only with a group of young people late last year, and they were being told to move on because people were complaining, and they said to me, Sue, where do you want us to go? We haven't got anywhere to go. And that really got to me, because You know, when I was 13, I was able to go to a youth club every single night of the week. I changed my religion every night to go to whichever but I was able to go to never. And when you go to youth clubs, because there are still some. When you go to youth clubs, I ask the children, the young people there, why do they come? And I was just horrified because it really did upset me. They came because to feel safe, not to see their friends, not to play games, but they came to feel safe. As an indictment of our society, I think that probably sums it all, actually. So, protecting our young people is absolutely key. And so, what's really important is that now the police have put a police officer or a PCSO allocated to every single primary school and secondary school in Avon Sunset, because that link is really important. It's important for those young people to see Gavin behind his uniform, to see that there are real people, and to have that relationship. So I'm really pleased about that. Which leads on nicely to the second priority about improving local policing teams. In Avon and Somerset, we ring-fenced neighbourhood policing because you told me very clearly that neighbourhood policing was really important to you. And of course it is, because with PCSOs and officers, when they're in neighbourhood policing, it's where they have time to have relationships when there's not a crisis. Of course, the first and foremost is always the response, because if you phone 999, of course the police have always got to attend. But actually, that's the sticky plaster. That's usually mean when something's too late. What we need to do is a lot more problem solving, working with local authorities, working with our parish councils, working with town councils, about how we can stop something happening. If we talk about knife crime, okay, I'm sure that some of you have been very exercised by what's happening in London and Manchester, and we are seeing an increase of knife crime in Avon and Somerset. But what's really key is the number of people who are being caught in possession of knives. So they've not used it for a crime yet, but they're using it, they're carrying them around. And they're in their thousands in Avon and Somerset in a year. So that to me is an indication of working and tackling the problem before we get to the point where, as police that we've seen in the Met and in Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool, is that if the police are only going to our children's broken bodies once they've been stabbed, it's too late. We have to go and work with schools. We have to prevent, we have to educate our children that if you take a knife out, that it's likely to be used against you. So we've got to encourage them to make wiser choices. So I'm really pleased at what the police are doing. So, but we've protected neighbourhood policing. We've protected PCSOs. We now have, in other forces, PCSOs have been stripped right back. In fact, some forces now don't have PCSOs at all. But the Chief Constable and I were absolutely convinced that neighbourhood policing is the way forward. And most people will tell me that that's right. We also have to make sure that the police are not seen as behind closed doors, that we are it's an open institution. Of course there are some things you can't know, that's obvious. But we have groups of people just like as yourself to come in and to scrutinise the police. So we have groups of people that come in and look at the way that the police use stop and search, look at the way that they use tasers, look at the way that they deal with complaints, look at the way that we have independent custody visitors, which we may have anyone here. Thank you. Independent custody visitors who after being trained will make sure that detainees are being treated fairly when they're being held in police custody. So, thank you. So we have groups of people who come in because it's not my police service, it's not Steve's police service, it certainly isn't the government's police service, but it's yours. And therefore you should have that access to the police. And we have independent advisory groups, which I went to the one in that covered this area last year, and where groups of people such as yourselves can come and talk to the police about areas that you think are not being concerned about, particularly areas where there's drugs dealing, where there's antisocial behaviour, where the kids are making a nuisance of themselves, and can work with the police about how that can be tackled. I also hold regular drop-in sessions around Avon and Somerset where people don't have to make appointments to see me, they just turn up. So I advertise those on the website, I advertise those locally, because as Police and Crime Commissioner, it's no point sitting in an office waiting for someone to come and talk to me. I have to go out and talk to people. The third priority is making sure that the police have the right kit and the right culture. So we've invested nearly £12 million on officers having laptops, having body-worn cameras, which you don't have. You've got your thank you. Body-worn cameras. And because what we don't want to do is we want police out and about. So they've got to take their kit with them. So I don't mind if I encourage police to go and sit in coffee shops. I want them to sit in your library. I want them when they're catching up with their paperwork, albeit on a computer. But I want you to be able to see them, because if they're in a station, you won't be able to see them. So we have 2,000 body-worn video cameras where people have, and of course that can encourage the police to behave better. Let's be honest, it encourages people who are being filmed to behave better. On our cameras, we've got the individuals can see themselves being filmed. So anything that's going to make you look less like a plonker when you can see what you look like when you see yourself on film, which is always good. And it's probably not a word I can use actually. I just realised I'm being streamed. Probably not a word I can use. Anyway, that will teach me. But it also means that when the police go into a situation where there's domestic abuse, so into a house where invariably there is furniture that's been broken, there are kids screaming, there are partners who are shouting, there may be injuries as well, that the camera can pick all that up, and that is much stronger in a court case than everything reading from a notebook, because all of a sudden then the judges and the magistrates see for themselves what the police have seen. So we are hoping that we will be able to increase our what we call victimless prosecutions. It's a ridiculous word, but it means that the victim doesn't have to come to court to actually take part in the court process because we've captured it on camera. And we have domestic abuse courts in Avon and Somerset, and I'm amazed that as many it's mostly women, not all, mostly women who are strong enough to come to court, but some are not. And because they're not doesn't mean that their perpetrator should be able to get away with it. And if you think about what the perpetrator may well be threatening, that I'm going to make sure the children get taken away, you're not going to have a house, I'm going to make sure you lose your job, you take your car. It's amazing that anyone actually does get to court to actually stand up. So that's why I'm so keen on investing in body-worn videos. But at the end of the day, of course, policing is too big. Policing and keeping our communities safe is too big for the police. We have to work very closely with local authorities and all our agencies, but also with you, working. There's you do amazing work on Community Speed Watch, Neighbourhood Watch, Farm Watch, all the various where you are the eyes and ears. Because of course, you will ask for many things, I'm sure tonight, and I will say to you that I'd like to have more police officers too. I'd like to be able to do all the things that you're going to ask us to do, but we don't. So we've lost 700 officers over the last few years, over 75, nearly £80 million worth of savings, and we've still got some savings that we've still got to find. But one of the things I did with increasing the council tax precept, which I know was a really big increase, and we had to think very long and hard, especially with those who are on low incomes, on fixed incomes, to ask for an extra £2 a month on the council tax. But what we have done with it, and I did this with collaboration with the senior officers, is that we could have used that to fill all our black holes. I mean, we have so many black holes. But if I'm going to come to you and say, this is what we have done, you've got to see something different. So, we are tackling 3 crime types. We went into consultation of the 3 crime types. There's residential burglaries, because if you get burgled, that's one of the most is a horrendous crime. Residential burglaries, drugs, because we're seeing the impact of drugs, and knife crime. So those were the three priorities, and what we have done is that we've allocated money into what's called Operation Remedy, and with Operation Remedy we will recruit 100 new police officers. No smokes, no mirrors. I don't mean replacing the ones that are leaving. I mean, we are going to actually recruit 100 additional officers, the first time in a decade that we've been able to do that. And we hope that the vast majority will be in place before next summer. So that's what we are doing with your money, specifically that you are paying for that. But working together with our local authorities, working together with you, working together with fire, and I think that we can make a real difference. But at the end of the day, of course, we don't have enough money. And no matter who our Prime Minister is going to be, they will have all promised loads of things. But we wait until we see the money arriving. But I think there is a belief now with most MPs and Cabinet that you can't keep cutting the police. If you continue to cut, then you cannot be surprised at the repercussions. Now, I am not saying for one moment that the increase in knife crime that we are seeing over England and Wales is wholly down to fewer police. But you don't have to be a rocket scientist to say that there's got to be some sort of link. And I think that it takes time. So if you think about the cuts we've been having for the late 8 or 9 years, and recorded crime was coming down, but recorded crime, I mean, we're lucky in Avon and Somerset. We did see an increase, but year on year at the moment we are just under, it's just slightly less than last year. We are in many parts of the country, crime is rising about between 6 to 10%. So we do see it, but we think that neighbourhood policing is the way to get through this, because if we can solve problems before they become a crime, then that's what we want to do. And I'm really pleased that Steve is here because he's responsible for neighbourhood policing. So I'm going to ask you just to say a few words before we go to Gavin, and then we'll have questions. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, everybody. If I just introduce myself, first of all, I'm Assistant Chief Constable Stephen Cullen. I've been with the force for around 18 months now. As Sue said, I am responsible for neighbourhood policing, but also the Communication Centre, which is where you contact us, the patrol function, which is the teams that respond to 999 calls, 101 calls, and also partnerships, because as Sue said, we don't do anything as a single agency anymore. We work hand in hand with a whole range of local authorities. So it's a real privileged job, because effectively I've got responsibility for all that sort of frontline policing that hopefully you see day in, day out in your local areas. Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to come and talk to you this evening. I'm always very conscious when I come to forums such as this that you have to take an awful lot in, and as Sue said, we're really interested in actually how you see policing from your perspective and what we can take away, and very much look forward to your questions, and hopefully we'll be able to put some insight into how we try to deliver policing within your local community. I'd kind of start off really by echoing what Sue said about this area being a safe place. That's not to say that we don't have our challenges, of course we do, but actually when you look at the overall position, we're actually seeing slight reductions in crime and disorder year on year. Our confidence level in the Bath and the North Somerset area is actually pretty high. It's touching on nearly 80%, which if you took a sort of sample across other sectors, that would be remarkably high actually. And he's one
Let me share with you. You have 80%, politicians have about 4%.
Yeah.
Okay, just like you.
So, but we're not complacent with that, because we recognise that that's a view of a certain group of people, and there will be different views out there, but actually it's a really good starting position because it fundamentally shows that the confidence in local policing is there. And similarly, our satisfaction levels, so when people are sadly the victims of crime, our satisfaction levels can be up to 90% in some cases, which again is remarkably high, considering all the challenges that we face in dealing with reports of crime. So what I'm saying is, when you add that to the support that we get from the local community, we're in a pretty strong place to begin with. But as I said, we have our challenges as well. So what I'd like to do is just build on what Sue has said and anchor what I'm going to say to the police and crime plan, because fundamentally that's what Sue holds us to account with and asks us to deliver on behalf of the communities. And I'd like to pick out the two areas that are most relevant really to, I think, the community and to me as a leader, and those are protect the most vulnerable from harm and strengthen and improve local communities. So if we just take the first one as an example, and again I will talk a little bit deeper about some of the things that Sue has described around serious violence, children and young people, and knife crime. It clearly is a national concern, and it's also a concern for Avon and Somerset. You know, the worst case scenario is what we're actually seeing play out in London, where young people tragically are losing their life, and then the perpetrator is also facing a lifetime, in some cases behind bars, because often the offenders are young people as well. So we want to get ahead of that, and at the heart of that is real early engagement with children and young people to provide them pathways, diversity activity, and choices for their future, so they don't end up in a situation, perhaps in their late teens, where we see those tragic circumstances play out. So what are we doing about that? Well, as I said, we already work in partnership, day in, day out, week in, week out, with local authorities, the third sector, health, education, and all the community safety partnerships will have violent crime and knife crime as a priority area. But over and above that, for the first time in a long time, we have had some additional funding from the government. Now this was largely as a result of Sue and the Chief Constable make an appeal to the Home Office to explain that actually Avon and Somerset has many of these issues too, and any help would be really appreciated. So we were actually granted 1.7 million for policing purposes in the main, albeit some of that again will be spent on partnership activity. And then only this week we had further news that a further 1.1 million will be granted through the PCC to in turn be shared amongst the Community Safety Partnership, specifically to tackle violent crime with a real focus on children and young people. So the government are taking this seriously, Avon and Somerset are taking this seriously. I as a leader, and certainly all my workforce, are determined to try and stem what we're seeing in terms of serious violence crime and knife crime in particular. What does that look like on the ground? Well, we're investing in some additional PCSOs to work specifically with children who are at risk or particularly vulnerable. We're going to do what you call surge activity. So based on evidence and intelligence, we do have some defined hotspots where violent crime and knife crime takes place. And an example of that will be, you may have read it in the media, some of the activity we did around the railway station in Bath with the knife arches, which was all based on sort of evidence, intelligence, and actually resulted in a really good outcome with some offenders from outside of the area coming in, part of a serious organised criminal gang, and we firmly believe as a result of our proactivity on that day, we stopped some serious harm. Other things that you'll see is a real visible presence at key events. So we're now into the summer season, and you know, a whole range of events at all different levels, from Glastonbury right the way down. You'll see an increased police presence at those events, and again, with a specific keen eye on targeting those who choose to bring weapons, drugs, or intent on causing harm at those type of festivals or other events which are designed for families and law-abiding members of the public. So that's serious violence. As I said, lots happening in that area. And I guess the other aspect, again, is to build on what Sue said about Operation Remedy, which specifically targets knife crime, drugs, which is often the driver of much criminality, and burglary, and that's in response to public concern. So we launched Operation Remedy on the 1st of April. As Sue said, we're aiming to recruit an additional 100 officers, but you would appreciate it does take some time to both recruit an officer, induct an officer, and then give them the requisite training and skills and confidence to go out there and do the type of work that we're looking for. So we're not at full strength yet, but we are working towards that. But the team, the Operation Remedy team, working hand in hand with the neighbourhood team, have got off to a really good start. And we've made it really clear that team must work force-wide. So Bath, Keynsham, the surrounding area will definitely get their fair slice of the cake. We've already seen a whole range of proactivity taking place. So I mentioned the activity at the railway station. We've done weapon sweeps at Royal Victoria Park and Henrietta Park. We've really focused on a phenomenon called county lines, where youngsters, and they are youngsters in the main, come from metropolitan areas and try to take the drug market in places such as Bath and Keynsham, and we've had some good positive outcomes as a result of that. And from a local perspective, I've no doubt Gavin will be able to expand on that and give you a bit more detail on that. But the point I want to get across to you is you've got a really strong neighbourhood team, we've got really strong local partnerships, and in the last 3 months we've been able to overlay that with some proactivity, and you're now actually seeing that, the benefits of that within the local community. So that's the kind of focusing on the most vulnerable. What I'd like to do is talk about neighbourhood policing. We are in a really strong position, and I think it's testament to the support of the public. I think it's testament to the work that local officers, local PCSOs have done over time, and the confidence that local communities have in them, that we were able to make that decision to retain neighbourhood policing at the heart of our policing model. Some describe it as the jewel in our crown, and I firmly believe whatever happens in policing, right up to the most serious things such as terrorism, actually the way we prevent that, the way we investigate that, the way we reassure communities has to start and finish in neighbourhood policing. So within the local area, as I said, we have a very, very strong approach. Gavin's obviously here as the local inspector, but he's supported by 6 local sergeants, 23 beat managers and 34 PCSOs. And then over and above that, and this is something I'll come back to, we're blessed with the support that we get from the Special Constabulary, volunteers and local cadets. So, there's a really, really strong basis, and of course colleagues from across the organisation, whether they're in the patrol function, the investigative function or our roads policing function, are in and around the area, working hand in hand with the neighbourhood policing team on a day-to-day basis. What we are seeing as a result of that investment, we're seeing increased visibility. So thanks to the investment in technology, thanks to the commitment of the local policing team to be out and about, we're seeing officers and PCSOs out and about in their community now, typically around 2/3 of their operational time. Now, considering all the other demands on them, that level of visibility is really good, and again, we'd like to improve on that further, because we know that the visibility is really important and it directly affects the confidence that you have in us. I think the other thing is that when we talk about reaching out to communities, we're starting to see some exciting things around social media. Now, I do appreciate it's not for everybody, and we have to think of lots of different ways in terms of connecting with our communities. But we are seeing that when local officers connect with communities, whether it be through Facebook or through Twitter, that people do feel more engaged, they feel more informed, and they're more inclined to work with us. And We're doing some pilot things at the moment, and as I said, the results are really, really encouraging. I think the other thing I'd say about local policing, and this is a bit of a plea really, our door is always open to you to come and help and work with us, and we have such a range of opportunities available to us. Typically at the moment we have around 1,000 people who work with us as a special, a volunteer or cadet, and then hundreds more who take part in Neighbourhood Watch and Speed Watch and all those other opportunities that are available to local communities. But we realise there's also a lot of untapped potential out there. Overall we serve 1.6 million people, so you can imagine the skills, the experience, the insight that local communities could give us in volunteering capacity if they had the time and the inclination to come forward, and then we in turn can help them in terms of that induction. So my plea would be that if anybody wants to get more closely involved, such as the gentleman at the back, or alternatively you know somebody within the community that you think could add value or is interested in policing and local communities, please come forward, because our door is wide open, and as I said, the range of opportunities is immeasurable really. So that would be my plea. What I'd also like to sort of wrap up with really is in preparation for today, as you would expect really, I had some engagement with Gavin as the local inspector and also people from the local team. And when I kind of asked questions that you would expect me to ask and perhaps questions that you would ask, I was really reassured because the local team were really on top of things. Without a moment's hesitation, they were able to give me all the things that are ongoing, all the things that are planned, and give me the real detail around that. So I think that reinforces again that you've got your local officers, your local PCSOs, your local volunteers who really care about your local community. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop overview, and as I said, I really look forward to your sort of questions and insight into how you see policing. Thank you.
All yours, Gavin.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Inspector Gavin Usher, so I'm the local neighbourhood inspector who has responsibility for the area that we've been discussing tonight. What I've done is, obviously you've had an overview from Mr. Cullen and Sue in relation to the sort of activity that the local neighbourhood team do on a local basis. I just wanted then just to sort of give a bit of local context about how it works, how it actually looked on the ground as well. So I just sort of prepared a few slides for you, which I'll run through now and just kind of give that sort of operational context, if you like, really. The area of the background itself, you'll know some of this, but I'll just run through it. So the area itself consists of 40 local wards. And then when we look at the police stations, obviously there have been some closures of police stations, Manvers Street obviously being the main one there. So the local station we have is in Redbridge House in Bath. That's on the Lower Bristol Road as you go into Bath, by the car garages there. We still have Radstock Police Station, and we've got a neighbourhood post here in Keynsham in the Civic Centre, which Sergeant John Bagwich, who's here, works out of. We have public counters at Lewis House in Bath, and that will soon become the Bath Police Station. That's on Manvers Street, so that'll be a visible presence there, which the local city centre team will work out of, and that'll give a lot more visibility in the city itself as well. Obviously Ashmead, which is one of the PFI sites, just down of Bath Road, which has got investigations, some of our safeguarding units, and also the custody base there. So that kind of is the local infrastructure, if you like, as it stands at the moment. So staffing wise, we have about 130 operational officers serving the Baines area. We work all these different areas that we're talking about. So neighbourhood police is my area that I run. We work in tandem with the response teams. So that gives us a breakdown of 74 PCs, 40 PCSOs in total with other functions, 15 sergeants, and 1 inspector on a daily basis that work out of that. So your neighbourhood team, which has already been kind of broken down for you already, consists of 1 chief inspector, which is Steve Kendall. I'm the neighbourhood inspector here. We have the 6 sergeants, so they're split across the area. So we have a city centre sergeant in Bath, then we have the outer areas of Bath covered by a sergeant. We have a sergeant here in Keynsham, and then we have 2 sergeants that work at Radstock, job sharing at the moment. They run the Radstock team. They're then supported by their staff. That's 23 neighbourhood PCs spread across those locations, and the 34 PCSOs that work alongside that as well. We also have a small problem-solving team that kind of works within our team as well, which then gives me a bit of an ability, say if we have a spike in antisocial behaviour or some other drug criminality to work in tandem with remedy, that we can put an extra small cohort of officers into that, sort of get in front of the game really and try to sort of problem solve that at every level. And they work within my team as well. So what does that look like for the challenges that we face as a neighbourhood team, and how does that look for us? As you know, Bath is obviously a major centre for tourism, 3.8 million visitors to the city each year. We do have a homeless issue and a street community in Bath in particular, not different to a lot of other major cities as well. We have a large number of educational institutions, the 2 universities. That's a whole community in itself that we engage with and try to sort of interact with. That adds to the nighttime economy and also the vast array of businesses that are in the city centre as well, which the local teams will engage with and try to work in tandem with. And then, as you will know, obviously we're sat in Keynsham now. The expansion of Keynsham itself is pretty rapid, with the developments at Fry's, and then on the outer areas as well. So that's also being replicated in some of the other rural locations outside of Radstock. So a booming area as well in terms of population increase and in terms of the challenges that will bring with us as well. The county lines issue has been already kind of alluded to briefly in a couple of things. That is a challenge that's sort of facing the wider communities across the country really, in different areas which perhaps haven't experienced that drug criminality and the way that that's been dealt with differently now. That is tackled, and we kind of problem solve that with my local neighbourhood team using other resources that are available to us. Or remedy being the main resource that we'll pull into now that really gives an impact on that. And there's some examples where I can talk about how we've tackled some of that drug criminality and also safeguarded some of these vulnerable people in the community that are cocooned, which is the term used when somebody takes over their property. And some of the work we've done around that to safeguard those people and try to ensure that they are not taken advantage of by those sort of drug gangs, if you like. Demand itself is an ever increasing amount of demand into the service and calls for that. So we had 37,357 requests for police service were received in the Baines area the last 12 months. That is a 1.3% decrease over the past 12 months. And that's one of the key functions that my neighbourhood team will be doing, is trying to look at areas where we can impact on demand and try to reduce it coming in, to try to problem solve that. So that works in tandem with partners, whether that may be mental health agencies, other statutory agencies and the voluntary sector, to try to understand problems and then try to reduce those calls coming into us by solving them upstream and getting in front of the problem. Baines itself has seen a 4.2% decrease over the last 12 months, and the Constabulary has seen a 2.5% decrease as well. So encouraging figures, specifically from the Baines area, when we look at some of the work that's been done. As we're sat in Keynsham now, Keynsham itself has seen a 12.1% reduction in crime and a 24.2% reduction in ASB. I know some of the questions that have come in have been related to ASB, but there's John, I'm sure John later on will be able to talk through what some of the work his team have done specifically with the ASB issue in Keynsham, which has had a real impact in relation to demand coming in, but that is an it's an issue that perhaps never goes away, and it's one that we've always got to be on the front foot and kind of alive to all the time as that changes. Mental health and missing persons. take up a great deal of our time, and again that comes down to some of the demand work that I do with the RUH, for example, which when you look at the demand profile for the Baines area, that's our the majority of our calls will come from the RUH. We get a vast amount from there. So there's a lot of work that we're doing with the hospital at the moment to try to understand why they're calling us, why they need our service, and perhaps look at some things that they can do themselves rather than just relating to call to us and then us having to deploy response officers, neighbourhood officers, to perhaps look for vulnerable people that perhaps we could have done a different service within the hospital itself. So that's a big function that we will do within the team. So specific concerns for Baines, I've already touched on the homeless community. The neighbourhood sergeant, Sergeant Raisey, who works in the Bath City Centre, is engaged with the homeless community. We work with voluntary sector, Julian Trust, the housing shelter there, and also the housing authorities, to try to work with them. We also do things, patrols where we go out and engage with the homeless community and try to look at ways where we can support them as best we can and not just criminalise people for the circumstances they're in at that given time. Street drinking kind of links into that, and there's been lots of work that have been done in the Bath City Centre as well around street drinking, using legislation to enforce, but also ensuring that we can signpost people to understand the impact they're having in the community in relation to that. Antisocial behaviour, already discussed, is an ongoing problem, but something that we work with the local teams and take very seriously. Drugs, criminality and road safety. I know road safety has come up in some of the questions as well in relation to that being linked really to antisocial behaviour and the way that some people use their motor vehicles. And again, I'll talk more in depth of that when we come through some of the question phase about some of the work that we do with Speed Watch, with volunteers, enforcement and targeted patrols, but we need that intelligence from the community, which is really important, so we know where we can focus that local resource to have the best impact for some of those issues. So what are we doing about it as a local team? What my officers are trying to achieve? We're focusing on the priorities. We need those priorities to come from the community at the local community forums that we hold across all those areas I've talked about. There we can then focus on our resources on trying to tackle those issues that are most affecting the community. Each of the neighbourhood sergeants for the area are given a portfolio to work on certain areas, and that kind of reflects to the priorities, and they can then work with me to try to reduce demand and improve service. We have a big night on economy in Bath that we work with licensing, the universities and the student population. Obviously we've had some tragic events in Bath where people have died in the rivers. We are now able to use the electric bikes, for example, to really patrol those footpaths, etc., the canal paths, and it really gets us a bit more access, a bit more mobile. That's part of the overall sort of response, where beforehand we would just potentially put officers in the city centre just walking the streets, if you like, around the public houses and the nightclubs. We can now spread that out. Certainly when we've got Freshers Week and some of those activities linked to the universities, we can try to divert our resources to try to think about some of those issues that may come around that as well. Speed Watch is being reinvigorated. It's probably something that did fall away slightly in the area. We have a volunteer who runs that for us, a really dedicated individual we work very closely with, and that's something that we're trying to replicate and spread amongst the wider area to really increase that over the coming months. We have targeted operations. We talked about what remedy, and then that problem-solving approach with all those agencies is something that as a neighbour team we really engage in regularly. Some of these things have been mentioned already. We talked about some of the innovations that really have come to the fore in the last 12 to 18 months, really. The body-worn cameras that the officers use, personal issue laptops. Just before I came across here, I was just talking to one of the officers who was talking about some issues down at the subway, and some youths hanging around outside the subway. So what him and one of his PCSOs have started doing is now taking their laptops down, they're sitting in the subway, and they're just I think they're eating the subways, I don't know, but they're there, visible, deterring that, and that activity just over a few days has already just moved that away, that issue that they had of that group hanging around there. And that's what we want to see from the officers, is out them in the community, using that technology to be visible, and by just their mere presence deter some of this activity. The electric bikes have been a fantastic addition to our fleet. We've got 2 in Bath presently, another 2 are coming online. If you go to Bath at all, you'll see the PCSOs and the local beat managers out on those wider areas, especially some of the hillier sort of outreaches of Bath, a really, really valuable asset to us. And the problem-solving approach, which I've sort of alluded to in the way we deal with things, we use a tool that we've got called Click as a data sort of analytical tool that we use. It really gives us the opportunity as local officers to understand demand from the community, but also us looking at it from a perspective of calls coming in from certain areas. It can highlight things to me as in a burglary spike, whereby I can see that very early on. I can then divert my patrol plans around that, focusing response patrols around that, local neighbourhood patrols around that, and really targeting our response. So a good tool that's really, really been valuable to us getting ahead of problems. And it's already been said, it's a great place to live and work. I really enjoy working as I know my local team do. They're very dedicated, they're really enthused about their work they do in the local community. It's something that's ongoing and it's developing. The team is developing all the time. We're always looking at new ways of working and new ways of doing things. So that is an overview on your local neighbourhood team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin. So now it's up to you. So now, if you'd like to ask questions, we've got a mic as well. We've got a mic as well. Yeah. Okay. If we could just keep the questions quite short. I'll try and make the answers quite short as well. But the point is that everyone's got an opportunity to be able to ask questions. And if we don't know the answers, then we will get back to you. So, you know, if we don't get the answers, you can give your contact details to my team in the front, and then we will make sure that we get back to you on them. So who's going to be brave enough to answer the first question? Oh, Dina, I think, as you've done us a courtesy of opening us, and please ask.
Well, hopefully my questions will be relatively short and quick to answer. You mentioned the Bath Police Station coming to a city near here soon. I just wanted to know whether or not this was the same sort of setup that ordinary residents would perceive to be a police station. And then I had a second question, so I was going to be slightly cheeky, which is around aggressive begging, and I wondered whether or not you were going to relaunch a scheme like you did previously around, I think, kindness kills. I don't know if that was actually what it was called, but certainly that kind of phrase has stuck in my mind.
Okay, well, either Steve or Gavin can answer the one about aggressive begging. I can answer the one about Bath. Are we ever going to get back to a building that we only occupied 3 floors of and had 4 floors empty? No. Are we going to get so that we're using taxpayers' money in a really effective and efficient way, that we will be, and we're working very closely with your officials, I only had an update on Bath this morning, that we are going to take over quite a substantial part of the ground floor. We're going to have a neighbourhood policing team there, and we will have a front office inquiry desk there as well. So I think that will be a really positive move, and so that will be Bath Police Station. But is it going to look different to the building that was opposite that is no longer? Yes, it is going to look different, but it's not buildings that solve crimes, it's people. And when you have to be efficient with your money, I'm going to put money into people first and every time. So, but aggressive begging, who's going to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. So there was a scheme. I think it's slightly that kindness kills, and I think I was only at a meeting, I think about 2 weeks ago, when we were discussing this very issue with some of the partners and the voluntary agencies and also partners in respect of the begging issue in Bath. There is a reluctance to go back to that scheme from some of the partners because of some of the sort of the connotations that come out of it and the perception that came from that. I'm not 100% sure that it needs to be relaunched in that way, because what we have a lot with the begging community is that we have an influx of tourists to the community, and then that draws people to be begging there because they know there's a fresh person, if you like, on a daily basis. It's not that same sort of community that they're begging from, it's tourists effectively. So I haven't really got an answer for you in respect of, are we going to relaunch that campaign? All I can say is there is interagency work to try to address the issue, try to signpost those people to agencies where they can help, and it's whether or not we relaunch that and how we publicise it is the other issue to other people coming from perhaps foreign countries, etc. And how we're going to publicise that so people know that we don't want them to be giving to people begging, because it only sort of makes the problem worse. So it's a really complex issue, I think, and I don't think we really have an answer, but there is a lot of ongoing work in relation to that, and there's regular partnership meetings with those sort of the voluntary sector around how we can best address it.
I think Gavin's right, it is a complex issue, and it's one that polarises communities. So on the one hand, I fully get that people may feel intimidated. I see it from the business's point of view, that they feel it may affect trade and so on. But actually our experience is that when we have been robust, a section of the community also don't feel that's right either, because at the root of many of these issues are mental health issues, alcohol dependency, drug dependency, and the root cause, which is actually about how we give people a chance in life, that's what needs to be resolved. It's not actually, we've kind of lost it if we're in a place whereby police are having to use enforcement activity. And when we do, as I said, we've received some negative feedback as much as the positive side that we get from other sections of the community.
I think it's very much a partnership working together, and I know there's various groups working with the council on this, and I know that the police are quite quick to respond to aggressive begging. But it is difficult, and there are so many people who are suffering from mental health. That is one of the real issues. Okay.
Good evening. Well, thank you very much anyway for everything you've told us. It's interesting to actually get some information coming back, because you're rightly and correctly making the obvious comment that people don't understand what the police do. My question, 2 questions, a bit cheeky as well, is number 1, how many officers out of the 100 would be assigned to Gavin and his team? And secondly, there was a report in the press, correct me if I'm wrong, where the Home Office has now banned the holding of mental health patients in local police stations. How's that going to impact on how you're able to do your job? Are you going to have to assign an officer to that person, or where are they going to go?
Okay, let's just talk about Op Remedy and the 100 officers. They are tackling 3 areas of crime. So they're not geography, they're across boundaries. So it's where the intelligence is where they're going to go. Okay. So as far as the those who are suffering from a psychotic episode, it was something in Avon and Somerset we decided in 2016 that we were not going to use them except in very extraordinary circumstances in police cells, completely the wrong place for someone, can only make it worse. And we work very closely with the clinical commissioning groups and the NHS. But let's be really, really honest, there are not enough mental health beds. So, I mean, I can witter on for hours on this one, so I won't bore you with it. But at the end of the day, in what's called in the old Avon area, there are 4 beds, and in Somerset there's 2. Okay, so until we can find a way of tackling that, that's one issue. The other issue is something that we fund now. We we fund mental health nurses in our comm centre, so that they can advise the police, they can have access to NHS records, and quite rightly not share everything with the police, but can ensure that the police can make better informed decisions about should that person be taken back to a carer, have they come off their drugs, have they, a whole range of things, and that has helped considerably the amount of people being what's called temporarily sectioned using a 136. But those numbers are beginning to increase, but it's working in partnership with the NHS, and we are working very hard on that.
Thank you.
This gentleman.
Thank you. Please could you tell us what the police policy is with regard to cars that exceed the 20-mile-an-hour limit? Because it's my estimation that 90% of cars do exceed that speed, maybe not by a lot perhaps, but it seems that only in my 20 years experience of looking in the papers, only once have I seen somebody prosecuted for exceeding the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Okay.
Is that the policy?
No. Let me. First of all, the police are not here to enforce, never have done with 30 or 40 miles an hour. But I'm a great supporter of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and I think that the last time I looked, over 500 people had to do the awareness course training for the 20 mile an hour. So we do catch them. We're trying to educate. We do not want to. That's why we don't do covert. We do overt. We want people to reduce their speed. We invest in Avon and Somerset more money on speeding than anywhere else in the country per head of population, and that's because local residents have told me that was really important to them. So we have invested in. We have 9 speed vans that go out where you as communities want them to go. We have 6 bikes who go out because there are areas where we can't safely put vans, because they've got to obviously be safe. We are the leading force in the country for more speeding tickets than anywhere else. So we have massive amount of investment. We have community speed watch. We have speed enforcement. We have road safety that will go out and work with communities and working with local authorities about how roads can be engineered to look like their 20 mile or 30 mile an hour speed limit. But at the end of the day, it's a bit like drink driving. Now society has got to the point where they are critical of people who are drink driving. We are not yet at that point where society as a whole is critical of those who are mobile phones, which I think is horrendous, but I think we will get there. But I think with speeding, it is to do with education, it is to do with making the road look like it is 20 mile an hour. It's no use just putting up a sign and then expecting people to drive 20 miles if it looks like it's a 30 mile an hour. So it's got to look the part as well. But we're working very closely with local authorities and working very closely with smaller town councils and parish councils about 20 mile an hour speed zones, because I absolutely get it. You've only got to look at some of the villages, particularly in Somerset, which have been basically wrecked because people go down there too fast, and people who are either older who have mobility problems or children will never cross that road because they can't do it safely. So there is a lot of work that we're doing with Somerset and with the Bristol and Bath road safety teams as well to continue to do that. So I can assure you that we certainly do catch them. And if you want, if there's a particular area that you want the speed enforcement unit, if you talk to Gavin or you talk to John, then they can add that onto their list as long as it's safe. It's got to be somewhere safe, and it's only up to 40. It's not the 50, is it? I'm sure we don't do 50. And so that's what we're doing. Okay. This gentleman in the checked shirt, and then I'll come back. Then I'll come to you, Alan.
If I could follow on from that, please, because I'm chairman of High Littleton Parish Council, which looks after the villages of High Littleton and Hallertree, which are bisected by the A39. In terms of crime, we feel very safe, and thank you for but in terms of road safety, we don't. My mailbox is full of queries from local residents about the safety of the A39. There is a feeling in the village that a fatal accident is inevitable. Unfortunately, there's also a feeling that until one happens, nothing's going to happen. And we're constantly told, I'm afraid, by Bath and North East Somerset, there's no money. Can you help us?
Well, there's two
And
things.
it's not, can I say, I don't think it's speed. I think it's lack of driving skill. It's bad driving. It's people mounting pavements because the road's congested. That's what the danger is for us, rather than the speed.
Okay. Well, we do work very closely with Bath and North East Somerset, and of course, you know, invariably it comes down to money. But do you have a community speed watch?
No, we don't.
Can I encourage you to do so?
Yeah, it's one of the things which we certainly want to look at.
Okay.
We had a councillor who was a former police officer who was very much against community speed watch, which didn't help. But there is a feeling, but there's no point in reporting it.
To notice so that you can have more and more resources if there is an issue. So if you want to know how to set up a community speed watch, if you go on the constabulary, it will show you, and someone will come and work with you on that. If you want to get the speed enforcement unit to come and have a look to see whether they can do they can take the mobile van or the bike there, they will come and assess the village as well.
I think the bike has been used.
That it's our police force. I think we should be concerned about the welfare of the police service. Now, it concerns me to see the numbers quoted up there of the demands and how that is far outweighed by the resource. Are we being conscious of the welfare of officers? Because if we lose officers through stress, overwork, call it what you like, then that makes the situation worse. It concerns me, having spoken to a dog handler who was talking about sometimes doing over 200 miles a night responding to calls. Traffic car sent from Almondsbury to Porton on the Water to deal with a serious, or in fact a fatal collision. So a real welfare issue. And it would be nice to be reassured that that sort of thing is in hand. And just a small comment, I was quite surprised by your comment about encouraging police officers to go into coffee shops. I've been retired 22 years from the job. Nobody ever had to encourage me to go to a tea stall.
I think just to talk about the coffee shops, we take some flack that how dare we allow our staff ever to eat and drink. So that's, I was just saying that they take me on that one because I want them to go and eat and drink as well. Can we talk about the welfare of officers, which is very key?
Well, I mean, thank you for looking out for us. I mean, first and foremost, obviously we put the public first, but we can only look after the public if we look after our staff. Policing has changed significantly, certainly since I was a PC. There is a lot more recognition of the stresses and strains that are going on both in people's professional and personal life. And the changing nature of policing, where officers are now having to deal with, as Gavin described, far more social welfare issues and in particular mental health issues, has to over time have an effect. So I'd say probably in the last 4 or 5 years the service has woken up to this, and our chief in particular is very clear that we are here to serve the public, but not at the expense of breaking our own staff. And as a consequence of that, and with Sue's support, there is a whole range of support in place. So if an officer goes to a critical incident, there's a professional debrief recovery programme that takes place within the appropriate timescales. The Federation and Unison, together with all the staff networks, do a whole raft of wellbeing activity, bringing professionals in, allowing officers respite, looking at working arrangements, bringing occupational health. The list is actually endless, but health and wellbeing is at the forefront of all our minds, because we recognise, we need fit people who feel well in themselves to serve the public. I think what we've seen, the traction that we've seen around the wellbeing agenda in the service, I only see continuing, because I think officers and staff are now far more open about where they are feeling under pressure, and that's a good thing, because then we're able to help them. Whereas in my day it was stiff upper lip and just get on with it, and I'm sure it was the case in yours. Just as a final thing, if you've got any of those tea stops, can you let them know, because they might still be going.
Just to follow on, one of the things that I find truly appalling is that every morning when I read my report, I've had officers who've been assaulted, and we've had people who've had broken jaws, we've had off-duty officers who've had really bad assault, and they have stepped in to prevent something from happening. And I think that is a terrible place to be. And I think that we will, if officers come to work to make a difference. They don't come to go home again to explain to their family, to their kids, why they've got a black eye, why they've got a broken arm. That is not acceptable. Okay.
Thank you. Could I go back to Community Speedwatch? In Chewton, Keynsham and Compton Dando, close to here, we've been trying to establish one in recent months, and we're finding it quite difficult. We keep hitting buffers along the way, and it's really encouraging to know that you are now trying to encourage them, because we want one. What is the magic secret to getting things moving? Is there someone we need to speak to?
Yes, Damien is on the top. I think let's get your details, and we will get someone to be in contact with.
Locally, I can, if you give me your details at the end via John there, I'll put you in contact with our volunteer we have as well, so we can... But
thank you, and it shouldn't be so difficult. There's a gentleman next door to you. Well, thank you.
This is a question for Inspector Usher. I'm one of the newly elected ward councillors for Salford. In fact, Alistair Singleton by my side is the other elected ward councillor for Salford. And one of the issues that we're picking up is the meat lane issue that I know you've been involved with. Now, a letter has just gone to residents. I've been sent a copy of it while I'm here. And it's from Lulu Gold, who is the Anti-Social Behaviour Coordinator at Avon Sunset Police. Now, in the letter, it does say open meetings were held with all parties. The meetings have been held with representation from both the boating community and local residents. But we're getting emails to say that the local residents didn't know anything about these meetings and feel very aggrieved that they weren't invited. So I believe there was a meeting last September and one more recently. So were local residents invited? If so, who attended? And can you assure us that if there's any such meeting in the future, that the people that live there do attend the meeting, or a representative, and the parish council, and of course us as the ward councillors?
Yeah, thanks for that question. It is an issue that I'm aware of. So the ongoing issue down at Mead Lane in relation to the boating community and the residents that are living there. I'll bring John into this one in a minute, so he'll be able to give because he would have been about at the time of September those meetings and the community trigger that took place. So as it stands at this time now, where it sits for us, it's a patrol plan. We are there. We are actively patrolling that area, and we will enforce any legislation breaches, any antisocial behaviour, etc. So we'll deal with that side of things. There is a wider partnership issue that needs to be dealt with by the local council as well in relation to the moorings that are there and how they're going to manage that. And I know that forms part of the ongoing work that's going on. From us at this stage, the council need to do some work around that, and we will, and I'm committed to do, our patrols in that area, and will continue to enforce anything. So my encouragement to you is, we do need the people that you're talking about there, the local residents there, to report these things to us. We need to know about it because it enforces the way that we will then deploy our staff and how we're going to do that. But the actual solution to this issue does need some other responsibility from the council, I think, in relation to those moorings.
Can I just get that?
Yes, sure.
Now, I appreciate everything you said, but you haven't answered my question.
Sorry.
Which were about representation at these meetings. Now, that's my point. Can you assure us that the local residents will be represented at any such meeting in the future, and the parish council? And were they present at these meetings?
The September meeting, I don't know. If you just bring John in, because he was there in September.
I was present at the first meeting in September when the community trigger was set by then Councillor Eldington. There was work undergone to identify what the problems were. I wasn't present at the residents' meeting. Although I do understand it went ahead at the beginning of this year at some point, and I don't recall the exact date, but residents were present. They certainly were present. And also there was a meeting with the boating community within recent weeks, and I attended that. So yes, I can assure you that anyone who, any involved parties who need to be told about these meetings will be told in the future, and that includes yourselves and the parish council. And that will also include residents and the voters as well. In relation to the letter, that's not just, although it's signed Google, that is a joint letter from Baines Council and the police. Although we've taken the lead in terms of chairing these meetings and the process, most of the issues in relation to Meadling are essentially Baines issues, in that there's allegations of sewage, littering, and things of that nature. Although there have been a couple of reports of public order incidences which we are aware of, which we have dealt with in turn dealing with the people involved in that. And this letter is a way of making sure that everyone understands, and there are allegations on both sides in relation to behaviour. Everyone understands what the expected behaviour is to be between the two different communities, and also effectively to draw a line at that point, a line of understanding that could be built upon in the future in terms of people's behaviour, and for everyone to understand what role they need to play in the issues that are going on down there. And that includes for the council and us as well in relation to how we deal with this.
We'll do the gentleman at the top, and then we'll come to the lady down here.
Hi. Gavin mentioned in his report that crime figures are down. Do you actually think that crime figures are down, or do you just think the reporting of crime is down? And do you have any plans to improve and encourage the reporting of crime? We have a big problem in Midsummer Norton with drugs openly being dealt on the streets, with kids using the streets as a racetrack in the evenings, and people are very reluctant to report for several reasons. One is they're worried about repercussions. Two, they find that the reporting system sometimes is very long-winded. So I'm wondering if you've got any plans to change or improve that.
I mean, we, policing across the UK, recognise that what is reported to us doesn't represent the totality of what's going on in local communities, and that has always been the case. You know, if you look at the crime survey of England and Wales, that will always differ to police recorded figures. The one thing I would say is what is reported to us, we're very good at actually receiving those calls within our communication centre. Our performance there is excellent, and because of the crime recording standards, we are very, very tight on making sure that when the members of the public come forward, we do record that as a crime or an antisocial behaviour incident and so on. There are certain areas of crime where, because of the seriousness, because of the vulnerability of the victim, we are actively encouraging people to come forward. Areas which have been traditionally underreported, such as hate crime, sexual offending, and in some cases domestic abuse, because, as I said, of the seriousness and vulnerability that surrounds that. It goes back to Sue's point earlier, really, that we can only deploy our resources and our assets on an evidence basis. So we would much rather know about these things, and we recognise that we need to keep working hard to open up channels for you to do that. And what I've been really encouraged by this year is more and more members of the public are doing that online. Now, you know, across the whole of the public sector and indeed the private sector, you know, we're all now used to reporting things online, and we're seeing that increasingly within the service. And my plea to you would be, if you are having antisocial behaviour or incidents of disorder, please report them, because that will affect how we deploy our resources.
That's the problem we're having. We're trying to encourage people to report, but they won't.
Well, I mean, they've always got the option of going to Crime Stoppers, where they can report to them. That information will come to the police, but they do that with anonymity guaranteed.
Right. It's just, I mean, there's a reluctance, particularly with crimes that are not, say, specific. So you've got an ongoing problem with kids racing their cars around the streets on every evening of the week. Now, you might report that once, or you report it every day. But we are struggling in this autumn to get any allocation of officers, particularly in the weekends.
Yeah, absolutely. We're feeding that into us as a neighbour with the connected community meetings that we have. So they're advertised on the websites, on the web pages for your local neighbourhood managers, your local beat managers and PCSOs. So they'll hold a meeting in a public environment, and that sometimes, if it's an ongoing antisocial sort of behaviour issue that's going on, to come down to those meetings, speak to the local officers so they can get a feel of what's affecting the community, and that sometimes is an easier way of doing it, because that gets directly into the officer, and the officer will then go back and look at some problem solving work that they perhaps can do around that issue that's being highlighted.
I meet with them every month.
Yes.
But they're not getting enough reports to get any allocation of officers.
Well, I think if you're reporting it, then we certainly should be able to address that and look at it. So that, for me, is the forum into it. And if they're saying they're not getting enough reports, then perhaps if it's an issue that's being raised on a regular basis, like you're saying, then that would sort of indicate to me that there is an issue there that we need to address. So where did you, Midsummer Norton, you said for that? Midsummer Norton. Okay, well, I will check in with the local beat manager. I'll make a note of that, and I'll check in with the local beat manager to see.
Thank you. I was really interested to hear what you were saying about the mental health nurses in your comms teams. Is that 24 hours a day? And if not, do you ever envisage a time when it will be? That's the first question. I'm going to do a sneaky second question too. I'm a parent of traumatised adopted young adults who came into our family because they were abused and neglected by their first families, with a long history of child and adolescent mental health service involvement for them because of the trauma they suffered at the hands of people that your officers go into and rescue our kids. However, they go on to have lifelong mental health problems, and they're pushed off the Cannes cliff. And one of my young men, unfortunately, had to leave our home due to child-to-parent violence, which is a form of abuse which actually doesn't figure, I believe, on your statistics. And he has since been in supported living in the Greater Bristol area. There is very little support, and the second anything goes wrong, like I think probably Gavin was saying, or maybe yourself was saying, that a phone call comes from the IUH, you said. So these supported living providers will ring the police at the drop of a hat for something that a parent would never do. And then our young people end up coming into custody. There is the liaison diversion service, but people don't that anything happened. So 2 queries, one about mental health nurses and how we're going to get that sorted out a lot quicker. Or you do ever see a time when there's going to be mental health nurses going out into the community with patrols and about the liaison officers and so on.
Okay, I'm going to answer the first one. Do I ever think it will go 24/7 if I have enough money? We do have mental health nurses that go out on street triage. As an evidence base, I don't think it's particularly successful, but it's something that we will continue to look at. But at the moment, it's all I can do to keep the funding for mental health nurses, because we do it 50% with clinical commissioning groups, and that I've got to keep having to have serious talks with them to keep going. So I don't know what time they finish. I think they finish at 10 o'clock. Anyone? 10 p.m. The mental health nurses. Any ideas?
Yeah, I think it's 10.
I think it's 10 anyway. But what we did do when we started it, we actually looked at where our greatest demand was, and that's where we put the nurses on. So although we couldn't afford to pay for it for 24/7, we actually did some evidence about when we picked up most people who are struggling. All right. Do you want to ask about custody?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing your experience, and the first thing I'd say is that we don't discriminate if somebody reports abuse and violence, whether it's in the home, whether it's a parent or a carer. We'll record that and we'll take that seriously. Your point about custody, I apologise that you had to intervene on that particular occasion. What I would say is that our custody staff receive the highest levels of training. We recognise that the custody setting isn't the place for vulnerable people, but because of the pressures on other agencies, the reality is that vulnerable people do come into that setting. As I said, the training that the staff gets and the support they get, actually, because obviously there are health professionals in the custody setting as well, is second to none, actually. So it's disappointing to hear that you had to intervene, because my experience of custody sergeants and the support staff that look after people is that their health, their well-being and that caring is first and foremost in their mind.
Sorry, can I just ask which custody suite it was? Okay. All right. We fund the custody and diversion, so we'll just check in with that. All right. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification on the crime figures. You gave us percentage reductions, but there was no base figure. Is it 0.2% of 20,000, or is it 2%, 0.2% of 10?
It's year-on-year figures we're looking at.
Just to say, Sue, I chair the forum. So I chair the forum, Brian attends that. And the recollection I have, and I can't give you numbers, but the recollection I have is that at the last meeting, the figures weren't that good.
Okay, what for Keynsham, particularly?
Keynsham district, yeah.
Okay.
Or Keynsham area forum.
Okay, so I've got, so as far as Keynsham is concerned, the figures I've got is down by 12%, which is 193 fewer offences, and ASB is down 24%, which is 142 fewer reports. So if you're thinking differently, then we obviously need to catch up with that. All right. So who reports into you at the forum? Which?
It was James Evans, I think. Yeah. Was like, or it might have even been John. I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember that.
Okay, we'll go through. We'll find out why they're different to the ones we've got. All right.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Gentleman with the blue jumper.
My question is to Sue, really. I think we're all worried about cybercrime and the grooming of young people, the age of 10 and so on. And you gave us a really quite scary tale of somebody coming from Australia to do those things. I assume that the police only managed to sort that particular problem out because they had intelligence from the community. My question
Mum,
is...
actually, but yeah.
Mum, lovely. My question is about looking at it from the other point of view, because we're obviously in a situation where more and more young people are going to get involved in social media at a younger and younger age, and I just wonder what is the relationship that the police have nationally with particular internet providers like Facebook, Twitter, and so on. What is your legal responsibility or activity with regard to access to people's personal accounts, and how cooperative, I think that's the polite way of putting it, how cooperative have these internet providers been in actually putting, we hear of terrible stories of executions and this sort of thing, and not being put down on the social media very quickly. I just wonder if there is a dialogue going on nationally between internet providers and the police service.
Yeah, thank you. It is quite scary. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just trying to show you some of the demand. But there is a National Cyber Coordination Centre. I may not have got that quite right, but that's basically what they do. And they work with the National Crime Agency, who works in turn with local forces. And they work very closely with some of the internet providers. But do we work closely enough, or do the internet providers take enough notice of the police? I would say probably not. There is an incident that with the Met that they wanted to access an individual's phone who had been murdered, and they are having to do a trial in, they've had to go to America, and there is now a court case that will take 6 months before we can get permission, before the police can get permission to have a look at this child's Facebook, because they think that that will link it to an individual who may have been the person who murdered her. That to me can't be right. And I think that we have to find a way with the internet providers. And to be fair, the government have been very, very hot on this. They are saying that there's going to be voluntary rules, and they have said, and they've backed that up by saying you have got a period of time, and if not, then we will impose it. We will impose some certain rules. I think there's always a problem, because one of the issues are that a lot of us can we buy stuff abroad when on eBay or whatever, and various providers. We don't even know we're talking to someone in Romania or Vietnam or Germany. So I think we need to probably be more careful as well. Is there enough going on? No, but there is now, thankfully, a lot more noise going on, and the government fully recognise that it is their responsibility to work with the providers. And I think that over the next maybe year to 2 years, there will be that. If you remember, Facebook had to come to a scrutiny panel on by the government, which they refused to attend. Well, the guy refused to attend. So I think there is, but like with all these things, we're dealing with international companies. But to be fair to our existing government, they are working very hard on being able to take stuff down much quicker, whether it's horrendous things or anything linked with CT. As far as authorities, I'm just going to, as far as the invasion of privacy, I just want for Steve just to explain to you about how difficult it is and the process that has to go. So it's not for a police officer just to decide to have any access. So do you just want to explain a bit?
Yeah, just as a broader point, I mentioned earlier that engagement with children and young people and our connection with schools is at the heart of our neighbourhood policing model. Within the package that we deliver with education colleagues to young people, internet safety is really at the heart of that. And at the appropriate level, we engage with children to try and prevent them engaging in that type of activity in the first place. Regarding the offending side of things, from the National Crime Agency to regional units to force level assets, there are specialists tackling online, and it is online child abuse at any one time and at some scale. But as you would appreciate, we have to do that with all the appropriate checks and balances in place. And we work to some pretty stringent legislation, and that type of activity is only authorised at very senior levels. And obviously we have to consider in particular the immediate risk to the child, and often we can't talk about that type of work, but I want to give you some assurance that, you know, coming back to the point about protecting the most vulnerable, as I said, from the National Crime Agency down, at any one time there is a lot of that type of activity to capture those very high risk offenders taking place.
Before I, sorry, the lady at the back, before I come back to ask anyone who's already asked a question.
Hi, one of the new councillors for the Western Ward, and we have Lansdowne Lane in our ward, where, of course, everybody knows was a very serious accident about 4 years ago where a young child was killed, and etc. And a resident sent me a photo today of some cars very dangerously parked on double yellow lines all the way up Lansdowne Lane at school pick-up time. I've been aware of this one being reported a couple of times before. Would that be, could I contact the local police connected with the local school? Would that be the best person to talk to?
Yeah, the local sergeant for that area is Adam O'Loughlin, who covers that area. So I'll note the fact that if there's a parking issue around school time on Lansdowne Lane, I will feed that back in directly to them, and we'll get some patrols around the school there. I'm not sure exactly who the PCSO is for the school itself, but off the top of my head, I'll feed that one straight back in, and we'll go to some activity around there.
Thank you very much.
My name is Tony Pilgrim. You, apart from the Facebook and element of the crime, you haven't, none of you have mentioned electronic crime, i.e. scams and identity theft and fraud. Is this in your priorities? And Mr. Cullen, do you accept that identity theft is a form of theft? And has it been dealt with?
I talked earlier about the changing nature of crime, and I dare say if I took a straw poll in this room and invited people to say, well, who's been subject of a fraud, an attempted fraud, identity theft, probably most of us would be putting our hands up. My daughter actually has recently suffered from this, and it's a hell of a game to try and untangle it. Yes, it is a priority, and it's a particular priority where vulnerable members of the society are affected by this. Again, you know, we have a tiered response, so there's a thing called Action Fraud, which acts as a kind of national clearinghouse in terms of reports of fraud and identity theft. And then in turn, as I said, on a tiered approach, it'll come down to a regional level where we have specialists working in this area, and in turn to a local level where we have people who are experienced and skilled and work closely with the banks and the other authorities to investigate those type of offences. We recognise that, you know, in some cases people can lose significant amount of money, but then over and above that, you know, the distress and disruption to their life can be significant. And the thing is with these type of offenders, they don't of course target one individual, they do it to some scale and almost play the percentage game until they get what they're looking for. It's a growing area, unfortunately, but it's an area that we are sighted on, and it's an area that we've got some specialist resources day in, day out investigating.
If as an individual you are affected, do you report this through the normal reporting system?
Yeah, as I said, I mentioned Action Fraud, who are kind of the national clearinghouse for this. That would be the first port of call. And then in turn what they do is triage it, risk assess it, and then obviously local forces will pick that up in due course.
Because Because I think the the difference between cybercrime and other crime is that the chances are the perpetrator not only does not live in Avon and Somerset, probably does not live in England, probably lives in a whole range of countries. And so that's why it all goes to action fraud, so that they can see the patterns, because it is a random. I mean, I don't know how many people have been targeted about not paying their television licence, or the fact that the HMRC have got a great load of money for you if only you click on this link. And the latest one I was offered yesterday a council tax refund. If only I would click that link, so people say.
That's never going to happen.
It's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen to me. But that's why it goes to them, and then they allocate it to specific forces. Okay.
I understand the real difficulties of fraud because of the international nature of it, etc. The reality is, until we can get the conviction rate up, perpetrators are just going to continue, because they're playing a numbers game, and they know that the prospects of actually being brought to book on this are so small, but they just keep playing the game. Now, we can do everything we like to make sure that people try to protect themselves, and that has to be the main device we've got. But at the end of the day, we have to get detection up, and we have to get people banged up for it, because at the moment it's just not happening.
Well, I mean,
not just in Avon and Somerset, nationwide.
Well, it's not even nationwide, because I was saying perpetrators don't live in this country. The point is, and one of the things that I went to a cybercrime conference a couple of weeks ago, and the speed, so they take money out in whatever way they persuaded you to give the details. They take money out, and it's within something like 40 seconds that they have put it into 30,000 separate bank accounts across the world. So trying to find that in that time is really, well, if not impossible, really a challenge. And but there is a lot of work being done across the world on with the cyber enforcers that various police. But what we have to do is try to protect our own. And so we have what's Ash's charity called?
Senior Citizens Liaison Team.
Senior Citizens Liaison Team, which will go out and talk to groups of older people who probably haven't, like me, haven't been brought up with being careful. And in the same way, we wouldn't go into a shop and leave our purse on the counter and then walk away, but we quite often do it with our bank accounts. We may only have one password because we can only remember one. So we do have a charity work very closely with the police, who go out and talk to groups of people who can be advised on how to take better precautions, because a lot of this is down to us because of the international attack that's coming from obviously outside our Avon and Somerset. Okay, is that it? All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Dina. So most of all, thank you, because we would have been pretty stupid sitting here in front of you. So thank you very much.